What happens when a legendary soul icon comes face to face with a host who refuses to respect boundaries? You won't believe what unfolds when Jennifer Hudson's relentless questioning pushes music royalty Chaka Khan to her absolute breaking point, in what can only be described as one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when respect goes out the window and egos collide in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. Last night's episode of The Jennifer Hudson Show was supposed to be a celebration of musical legends, but what viewers witnessed instead was a masterclass in how not to treat your guests. From the moment Chaka Khan walked onto that stage, the tension was palpable, and by the end of the show, America watched in stunned silence as one of music's most revered artists had enough of Hudson's disrespectful behavior. The trouble began almost immediately after the commercial break, when Hudson, seemingly determined to dig into personal territory that should have remained off-limits, decided to pivot from discussing Khan's latest projects to probing into the singer's well-documented struggles with addiction from decades past. The shift in energy was immediate and uncomfortable, with Khan visibly stiffening in her chair as Hudson launched into what would become an increasingly invasive line of questioning. "Chaka, I want to talk about your journey through some dark times," Hudson began, leaning forward with an intensity that seemed more predatory than professional. "You've been very open about your battles with addiction, and I think our audience would really benefit from hearing about those lowest moments in your life." Khan's response was measured but firm, her legendary voice carrying a warning that Hudson either didn't hear or chose to ignore. "Jennifer, I appreciate the platform, but I came here to talk about my music and my current projects. That chapter of my life has been discussed extensively, and frankly, it's not something I care to rehash today." But instead of gracefully moving on to safer territory, Hudson doubled down, her smile never wavering, even as her questions became increasingly intrusive. "But Chaka, don't you think sharing those struggles could inspire people who are going through similar situations right now? I mean, you hit rock bottom, right? Tell us about that moment when you realized you had lost everything." The studio audience, which had been warmly receptive moments earlier, fell into an uncomfortable silence as Khan's expression hardened. Her eyes, which had sparkled with warmth during the opening segment, now carried a steely warning that Hudson seemed oblivious to. "Jennifer, I've said what I'm going to say about that period of my life. Let's talk about something else." However, Hudson wasn't finished. In what can only be described as a breathtaking display of poor judgment, she pressed even harder, seemingly energized by Khan's obvious discomfort. "Come on, Chaka. You're among friends here. Our viewers see you as this strong, powerful woman, but they need to know that you're human too. What was it like when you were using? How bad did it get?" That's when the atmosphere in the studio shifted from uncomfortable to explosive. Khan sat up straighter in her chair, her posture radiating the kind of controlled fury that only comes from decades of dealing with boundary-crossing interviews and disrespectful treatment. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice dropping to that unmistakable tone that anyone who knew Chaka Khan would recognize as a final warning. But Hudson, perhaps emboldened by her own success, or simply tone-deaf to the gravity of the moment, made the fatal mistake of continuing. "I'm just saying, our audience connects with authenticity. They want to know about the real Chaka Khan, not just the polished version. Tell us about hitting rock bottom. What happened next will be replayed and analyzed for years to come." Khan's face transformed from controlled irritation to genuine anger as she realized that Hudson had no intention of respecting her clearly stated boundaries. "The real Chaka Khan?" she repeated, her voice rising with each word. "Let me tell you about the real Chaka Khan. The real Chaka Khan has been in this business for over 50 years, has earned her stripes, and has paid her dues in ways you couldn't even imagine." The studio fell deadly quiet as Khan continued, her legendary presence now filling every corner of the space with an energy that was both magnificent and terrifying. "The real Chaka Khan knows her worth and doesn't need to justify her life choices to anyone, especially not to someone who thinks trauma is entertainment for ratings." Hudson, perhaps finally realizing she had pushed too far, attempted to backtrack with a nervous laugh. "Chaka, I didn't mean to upset you. I just thought—" "No, you didn't think. Khan interrupted, her voice now carrying the full weight of her decades in the music industry. That's exactly the problem. You didn't think about respect, you didn't think about boundaries, and you didn't think about treating a guest with dignity. What you thought about was creating a moment for your show at my expense. The tension in the studio was now so thick it was almost suffocating. Camera operators adjusted their positions. Audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and Hudson's production team could be seen frantically whispering among themselves off stage. This was clearly not going according to anyone's script. Hudson, her composure beginning to crack under the weight of Khan's justified fury, made yet another crucial error by attempting to justify her approach. Chaka, I'm sorry if you feel that way, but as a talk show host, I have to ask the questions that people want answered. It's nothing personal. That phrase, nothing personal, seemed to be the final straw for the legendary singer. Khan's eyes blazed with an intensity that reminded everyone present exactly why she was considered one of the most powerful performers of her generation. Nothing personal? She repeated incredulously. My life, my struggles, my pain, that's nothing personal to you? Standing up from her chair with a grace that belied her obvious anger, Khan continued her devastating takedown of Hudson's unprofessional behavior. Let me educate you, young lady, since you seem to need the lesson. When you invite someone onto your show, you're not entitled to every painful moment of their existence. You're not owed their trauma just because you have cameras rolling. Hudson, now visibly flustered and clearly out of her depth, attempted one last time to salvage the situation. Chaka, please, let's just... No, Khan said firmly, holding up a hand that silenced the host immediately. We're done here. I came here as a courtesy, to support your show and share my music with your audience. But I will not sit here and be disrespected by someone who clearly doesn't understand the first thing about honoring their guests. The power dynamic in the studio had completely reversed. Where Hudson had started the segment as the confident host in control of her domain, she now sat diminished in her chair, while Khan commanded the space with the authority of someone who had earned every ounce of respect she demanded. I've been interviewed by everyone from Oprah to Barbara Walters, Khan continued, her voice steady but filled with righteous indignation. Real journalists who understand that you can ask tough questions while still maintaining respect and dignity. What you're doing isn't journalism. It's exploitation disguised as entertainment. The audience, initially stunned into silence, began to murmur their support for Khan's position. Several audience members could be heard saying, "That's right," and "Tell her, Chaka," while others simply shook their heads in disappointment at Hudson's behavior. It was becoming increasingly clear that the audience's sympathy lay entirely with the legendary singer. Hudson, perhaps realizing that she had not only lost control of the interview but also the support of her own audience, made a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of authority. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I was just doing my job as a host. Your job, Khan replied with withering disdain, is to make your guests feel welcome and respected, not to ambush them with invasive questions about the most painful periods of their lives. Your job is to celebrate your guests, not exploit them for ratings. With those words, Khan began removing her microphone, her movements deliberate and dignified despite the chaos of the moment. I've given this industry 5 decades of my life, my voice, and my heart. I've shared my struggles when I chose to, on my terms, and I don't owe anyone, especially not you, any more of my pain for their entertainment. Hudson watched helplessly as one of music's greatest legends prepared to walk away from her show, taking with her any credibility Hudson might have had as a respectful interviewer. The host's attempts to maintain her composure were failing spectacularly as the weight of her poor decisions became impossible to ignore. I have too much respect for myself and for my legacy to sit here and be treated like some reality TV star desperate for attention, Khan declared, now standing tall beside her chair, microphone in hand. I am Chaka Khan, and I deserve better than this. The final moments of the confrontation were perhaps the most damaging for Hudson's reputation. Instead of offering a genuine apology or acknowledging her mistakes, she continued to defend her approach. Chaka, I understand you're upset, but your viewers expect you to treat your guests with respect. Khan cut her off sharply. They expect professionalism, not this tabloid nonsense. And frankly, They deserve better than a host who thinks someone else's pain is content for her show. As Khan handed her microphone to a stunned production assistant, the studio fell into complete silence except for the sound of her footsteps as she walked toward the exit. Every step she took seemed to echo with the weight of her justified anger, and the dignity she maintained even in the face of such disrespectful treatment. Hudson made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Chaka, please don't leave like this. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about." But Khan didn't break stride. Without turning around, she delivered her final words to both Hudson and the audience. "I'm 70 years old, and I've earned the right to choose what I share and when I share it. No one, and I mean no one, gets to demand my trauma as the price of admission to their show." And with that, the Queen of Funk walked off the Jennifer Hudson show, leaving behind a stunned host, a shocked audience, and what will undoubtedly go down as one of the most spectacular examples of a guest refusing to tolerate disrespectful treatment in television history. The cameras continued rolling as Hudson sat alone on her stage, finally understanding the cost of prioritizing sensationalism over respect.